Hey, what's up, everybody? Gonna do a reaction. This is featuring John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones is the artist of the month for January, and what I've got for you here, man, is something pretty interesting. It's going to outline some of his early years, pre-Zeppelin, mainly when he was a session musician. And then, of course, it's going to go into more of the Zeppelin years. There's an interview that we're going to do. It's a 60-minute interview, and it's from 79. And then after that, we're going to hit up a super short clip of John Paul Jones during their Hall of Fame acceptance speech. So, man, before I pop this off, I want to give a shout out and a thanks to Amy Brookes. Amy, thanks very much. Thanks for the recommendation and the links, man. Amy says, "Hello, Wayne. I've got some great Jonesy stuff for you. I made a playlist and put it in chronological order." So yeah, what I'll do with your playlist is I'll kind of go through it and I'll separate his Zeppelin time from his post-Zeppelin time and put the post-Zeppelin stuff at the back end of the month. So from the 15th on, it's going to be his post-Zeppelin stuff. So we'll just basically focus on his early years and his Zeppelin stuff on the front end of the month here. So what brings me to, I'm particularly interested in three of your links. One is what I described as the session years of John Paul Jones. Then in the interview, Amy says there's a 60-minute interview from 79 I just found with Plant and Jonesy, but I haven't listened to much of it. I just found it. Plant may be talking a lot as usual, but from the comments it seems Jones gets some quality time too. There's a super short clip of Jones giving Plant and Page their comeuppance for leaving him out of their collaboration. That feels pretty good. Haha, she says. So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to that. So that's the order that we're going to do things in. His session stuff, and that's like about a 6 or 7 minute video. Then the 60-minute interview, and then the short clip of him giving them their comeuppance. So I'm looking forward to that. What we'll do is we'll do it one after another, back to back, and then we'll have kind of like a little review afterwards. So with all of that said, needless to say, for some of you, this shit is going to be dry as hell, right? Because it's not really featuring any music of Led Zeppelin per se. It's more about the man himself. So, for some of you who are only here to merely be entertained, this is not the reaction, right? Go somewhere else. You will probably be entertained somewhere else, but this is for the real and the true Led Zeppelin fan. I am the real shit. Give me a hashtag. All right. To the real and the true Led Zeppelin fans, the great John Paul Jones. Let's get it.
John Paul Jones is one of the younger members of the session ranks. He was just 20 in January, but his musical ability is such that his future in British show business is virtually assured. Producer Mickey Most has signed up John as a musical director, and his first two products are Everything I Touch Turns to Tears by Barry St. John, and Land of 1000 Dances by the Cherokees. His big task comes up in April when he flies to the States to take charge of the music for the Herman's Hermits film. John has developed tremendously in this direction of his career, and he seems to be spearheading the new breed of musical directors along with Mike Vickers of Manfred Mann. But don't get the idea that John is putting sessions aside. This is a very important part of his day-to-day life, and he has no intention of stopping his work as bass player in the recording studio. He can play piano, organ and bass, but it's on the latter instrument that he is really in demand by the top stars. And by top stars, we mean people like Shirley Bassey, Kathy Kirby, Lulu, Paul and Barry Ryan, and Dave Berry, all of whom John has backed at one time or another.
Listen to
And they are
Shirley
just a
Bassey's
few.
rendition of
John has worked
Goldfinger.
hard to get where he is today. Music was in his blood from the start, as his father was a pianist, arranger and bandleader, and his mother was a singer and dancer. He lived in Eltham and he was influenced musically from an early age. He was taught the basics of the piano and decided he was more interested in the organ as a keyboard instrument, but found that to learn this instrument properly, he needed tuition. He came up to London for lessons, and by the age of 14 he was playing at the local church. It was around this time that he began to take an interest in the bass.
With their hands.
I couldn't even play a 6-string acoustic guitar when I started, John said. I was just fascinated by bass work. I used to turn up the bass on my records and listen to the runs.
That's a pretty hard
And
shot.
in time,
man.
I just
The
picked it
cigarette.
up. I can also play ordinary guitar now, by the way. John recalls that he got hold of a Dallas Tuxedo bass guitar and a made-up amp of about 10 watts. When he was pretty proficient on this instrument, he joined a few local groups, and gained an entrance into Tin Pan Alley by joining up with a backing group for vocalist Chris Wayne. The group didn't make any hit records, but they were quite well known in London due to appearances on Saturday Club and other programs on television and radio. And it was through this that John began to get to know quite a few people inside the business. One day, he saw his chance of a big break and took it with both hands. John said, I saw Jet Harris, who had just left the Shadows, walking along Archer Street one day. This was just when Diamonds was hitting the high spots. The song was breaking big in the charts, but it had happened so quickly that Jet Harris and Tony Meehan had made no plans for a backing group. So I saw my chance and took it. I went up to Jet and asked him outright if he wanted a bass player. He fixed me up for an audition and I got a job with him and Tony. John played in Jet and Tony's backing group in concerts all over the country, and on their successful follow-up discs. And this was just the start. All his experience has led up to a very attractive offer from Mickey Most, but not even this will take him away from his role of Mr. Bassman in the studio. This was John Paul Jones in early 1966, but John kept doing session work until late 1968, when Led Zeppelin were formed. Here are some of his best moments as a session man. In 1967, the Rolling Stones released their Satanic Majesty's Request. The album was panned by both critics and fans when it was released due to its psychedelic direction. John Paul Jones was hired to write the string arrangement for the song She's a Rainbow, which remains one of the most popular tracks on the album. John's string arrangement perfectly complemented Brian Jones' mellotron part, and that delightful piano by Nicky Hopkins. John had known Stones manager Andrew Oldham since 1964, when Oldham produced his first solo single. The single featured a rather unremarkable cover of a Lee Hazelwood song, but it was during those sessions that he was given his stage name. Andrew Oldham thought John's birth name, John Baldwin, wasn't commercial enough, and he suggested he changed his name to John Paul Jones. And as they say, the rest is history. It was also during those sessions that John Paul Jones first met engineer Glyn Johns. Glyn Johns later worked as an engineer on several Led Zeppelin albums, and he was responsible for John Bonham's massive drum sound on the song When the Leaf Breaks. Both John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page played on Sunshine Superman by Donovan. The song is definitely one of the highlights of their days as session men, and it's one of the earliest examples of psychedelia. It was recorded in December 1965 and was released as a single in America in July 1966. Due to a contractual dispute, its UK release was delayed until December of that year. Sunshine Superman was arranged by pianist John Cameron and Spike Heatley, who played double bass on the song. John Paul Jones played electric bass and Jimmy Page provided the guitar. They both played on many other Donovan songs, and Jones even worked as an arranger on many of those sessions. One of John's last sessions was with P.J. Proby in late 1968. The song Jim's Blues has a major historical significance because it was the first time all the members of Led Zeppelin played together in a studio. The track featured Jimmy Page on guitar, John Paul Jones on bass, John Bonham on drums and Robert Plant on harmonica.
John had the thunder from the very beginning.
August 4th here in Nebworth, England, right, Zeppelin was the primary draw for more than 200,000 people. And yesterday, August 11th, right, after a 2-year hiatus with no concerts or albums, 150,000 more came. Are you surprised by the band's obvious drawing power and loyalty to Zeppelin fans after all that time?
I still can't quite take in the fact that people would have come from around Europe and the States and goodness knows where. It was, in a way, it was a bit unfair because I did hear there was a rumour that it was the last thing that we were ever going to do, and I thought maybe that was something to do with the fact that so many people had come. But in the 2 years that I haven't done a great deal, I started to draw the conclusion that the whole thing was something of the past anyway, And so to me it was just completely mind-boggling.
So you really,
about you?
Not the dinosaur club again.
Yeah, but you really don't understand. I mean, it's like that. That maybe I'm sure you understood the impact of the Beatles, right? But that was because their songs were so accessible. I mean, to even people who are, say, over a certain age group, demographically speaking, right? But you see, to us in America anyway, it's this very same kind of impact. I mean, I don't think you really quite understood what it meant when that you sold out. The Forum, in Los Angeles, more than any other band has ever done. And that you've outgrossed, I shouldn't say outgrossed, but attendance-wise, you've broken the Beatles' records twice now. You broke your own record, I think, the Beatles' record in '75, and then you broke your own record in '77. And that's an impact. That's, that maybe the businessman who's in his 50s doesn't quite understand that. And maybe he doesn't walk around and sing Led Zeppelin songs. Yeah. But people under 40 years of age are very much aware of who you are, and that impact is just as strong. And even though you've been gone, from the scene as far as records or albums or concerts are concerned for 2 years, everybody's still waiting, just as they waited in the 60s for the Beatles. It's the same thing.
It's funny, really, because, you listen to the Beatles, and, as English guys, we really put them, well, I know I do, and I'm not so sure. I think John prefers Jerry and the Pacemakers. But we really put them on a kind of, they are on a pedestal for which there is no touching, because there was that itself, the whole kind of thing, was, it was just a one-off. So whatever we do, any comparisons between ourselves and the kind of fame or success or drawing power or anything, it doesn't mean a great deal, really. Because it was a different kind of fame, a different kind of drawing power. Different kind of...
They did different work. They only did, 2 tours of America?
Yeah, but nevertheless, you have to understand the impact. Here we are, because I'm seeing this, too, for the first time. This is my first large concert here in Great Britain, right? And we don't know if it's going to rain from day to day or what. And kids have been camping out like all week in this kind of, let's face it, inclement weather it could be.
English weather, yeah.
Yeah, and yet they've been waiting to hear, the Led Zeppelin. That's what they've been waiting to hear. So you must understand that this is the 70s and going into the 80s.
Yes, it is nearly the 80s.
And we've had that, you've had that kind of impact, right? And in fact, I would be remiss, I think, on my duties if I failed to ask probably the simplest but most important question to the American audience, and that was, when do you think the Led Zeppelin will tour America? Because we get that question asked to us every day.
Well, I don't know. It's like, when's it going to rain in England, really?
Oh.
It's one of them things. It makes us feel, I think genuinely now, very, very humble. At the fact that despite all the current kind of wave of press and media movement towards music, which is probably a little less tangible, but is supposed to possess a great deal more excitement, that we can still appeal right across the board like that. It was amazing to look out there, wasn't it? See that willingness in those faces. In England, England is always known as being a little bit more reserved in its appreciation or rapport. Yeah. And I think we felt that in the past. But these 2 weekends have been like the height of any great American, movement that we've had out there, any great kind of period that we've had. It was sensational to think that it can still be going on. So it would be interesting to see what it's like in America again, especially in Dallas.
How about Los Angeles? Because you're very strong in Los Angeles and New York.
Who do we know in Los Angeles?
Oh!
What was her name?
Do you think you'll be able to do it seriously before 1980's out anyway?
Oh, I should think so, crikey. Yeah, it's just got to fit in with the soccer season now. You know, we managed to get these 2 concerts in.
Yes, since there's some soccer coming on in America.
Well, we do have the Los Angeles Aztecs, and we have got the Cosmos in New York, right?
Yeah, but I could play for the Aztecs, let me tell you.
Listen, in a Zeppelin live performance, improvisation plays a rather large part, and it works amazingly well, of course. But does this come about as spontaneously and naturally as it appears to those of us in the audience? Because no Zeppelin performance is ever the same.
Well, yes, it does. I guess we set out, you know, with like a skeleton of a song, and then we probably forget it and have to improvise to get through the rest of the act.
It's probably very true.
Very exciting. On
No,
the
but that's the
stage,
way it goes. Yeah, we said on at these gigs that we keep it short and sweet and crisp. And like no long solos, none. You know, because when we played the Forum, it was going on for 3.5 hours, and it was like Jonesy was playing piano concertos, and Pagey was like doing everything that you could possibly do to a guitar, and all this sort of, you know. And it was going on. In the end, I was like an innocent bystander, smoking loads of cigarettes and watching from the wings. So we said this time we'd cut it all down short, just bang, bang, bang.
Of course, it never happened.
And now it's 3.5 hours set again.
Well, it's great, because I remember that in Los Angeles, and Jonesy went into a little bit of Rachmaninoff's impressions on a theme by Paganini, and then he segues into a little bit of Miles Davis's sketches of Spain, and I flipped out.
Yeah, but it after a while it gets boring. I mean, not Jonesy gets boring.
Thanks a lot.
No, but I mean, you got to keep. I mean, the thing was that we managed to keep, or tried to keep the crowd on their toes by being able to get to the end of a song within the hour. You know. So it would like start and finish within about 5 or 6 minutes. Because you can go on.
Good.
Well, Jonesy, like when you're playing, do you consider, like, because I have always thought this, now if I'm wrong, and seriously, I usually want to ask you this seriously up front, that Robert's voice, the way he uses it, is almost like another instrument to the band. It's not like, you know, just vocals for lyrics.
Right.
It's like another instrument with all of those things that he puts in, and it's just like another voice, it's just like another instrument. And that's why I was saying about the improvisation.
That's why his innocent bystander remark doesn't really hold water. You know, he just pretends
no,
he's only sings it, but given a couple of bars with
You can't sound like a keyboard, whatever you try and do, let me tell you. I think really it was because there was so, in the during making the first album, I mean, it was new fields to us all, really. Bonzo and I had stepped into the world of Buffalo Springfield and Moby Grape and things in the Band of Joy, where the music moved away from it just being a straightforward song, like the Beatles.
Yeah, they were really young.
Or like Tommy James or whoever, you know. And so Bonzo and I were used to these extended passages anyway, and Jimmy had done it in the Yardbirds, and Jonesy had been dying to do it. And so when we started making the first album, I found that there were like instrumental pieces in Dazed and Confused and How Many More Times, where I was just sat on a stool, you know, with my legs dangling, while the guys really played like mad, and I loved it so much. Suddenly it just came, you know. I had to be a part of it, because I felt too stationary if I was just left sitting on a stool with some headphones on, and some cans on my head. I had to start doing something. And just all that sort of thing started coming, you know.
Right.
Jimmy and I mocking one another with the guitar and the voice and things like that.
And you did do that very early on.
Yeah.
And I do remember, because now that you mentioned that, because, you know, I was around for that first tour, as you know, and I remember I got you a copy of the Buffalo Springfield's extended version of Bluebird.
I've still got that cassette, yeah.
Do you? That's correct. Now, listen, the Zeppelin is and has been a great favorite among rock DJs, and most importantly, a vast majority of the rock and roll audience for the past 10 years. So why is it that the written press has, in America and even here, right, either ignores or downright is rather vindictive concerning your proven success in regard to album or on stage? I don't understand that.
I think
You're bad.
they never really liked us in the beginning, because they didn't really have too much of a part in building us up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, they felt that if they didn't do it, they must have missed out, and how come we did it without them anyway? Then when they started writing really vicious reviews, then I suppose we started keeping them out of gigs and things like that. We went down absolutely no better at all.
Oh, yeah.
And it's never changed. It has never changed. I mean, I read this morning that we were an American-based band. I mean,
in an
this
English
morning,
paper?
After 11 years in an English paper, they still think we live in America.
Yeah, it's criminal, really. It's the way that it goes. You know yourself, JJ, from your dealings, you have to come across people from the press. I mean, and the nicest are vaguely nice, you know, because they have to have that kind of quality in their personality whereby they're capable of being nice on the night and schneid the next day, you know? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, it's like one of those built-in things. That's how you're a successful press person, because people read what you write and they probably hate it, but they'll read it. And they'll just hate you, but you get the press, you know, and people read you. And I think we've always been smitten with this. I mean, I've spent the last 5 or 6 days calling everybody and going up to the mountains in Wales and sitting looking out and wondering what in hell's name went wrong because of the reviews from the last concert that we did, which was a little bit shaky, but it held all the energy that all this supposed, anything else that's going on, we've surpassed it, energy level, because of the fact that we were nervous. We put out so much, and yet it looked like we were like a bunch of, I don't know, garbage collectors who just got up there and played, you know. And it breaks your heart. Even now, after 11 years, it's quite fair to say that I was heartbroken, because it didn't, all the reviews, they didn't even reflect on what was going on. And we found out a lot of people left before the end of the concert, and they called the record company to find out what the encores were. Did they do an encore? Yeah. They did 3 encores, you know.
These are the press people you're talking about, yeah.
You know, because they just went away. They want to make their own heroes, and they want to be responsible for their own heroes.
So, but why does it affect you so negatively? Right. If you understand that obviously your audience, and one of the, to me, and I don't know if you would agree with this, in fact I'll find out, and that is that a great rock and roll band to me, and all of the great rock and roll bands, seemingly to last 10 years, you have to be able to recycle your audience. And what I mean by that is maintain your older audience, the people who were with you in the beginning, but at the same time bring along the new people. And to me, all great rock and roll bands, the Zeppelin, the Who, the Stones, and on, are capable of doing that, where you look in the audience and you'll see, you know, 15-year-old kids and also 35-year-old people, you know, who were there in the beginning, and the 16-year-old kids who are just getting turned on to it all now. And I think all the great bands can do that. And obviously you can do that and still do that and command that kind of audience. So why do you let it really affect you like that? Because all the press, you know, if you know the reasons, and the press is obviously wrong. You get the radio airplay in America, and the disc jockeys are basically, that I know anyway, on FM rock, are all behind you, and the kids are all behind you, and they all, and like I say, the people in their late 20s and even late 30s are all behind you. So you really don't need that.
I know. I can't understand for the life of me.
I think it's a perfectly human reaction to it.
Human reaction.
You read a really bad and, I mean, totally incorrect review the next morning, and you think somebody's going to pick that up. Maybe they couldn't make the concert, or maybe they don't even like the music, or you know, they've heard the band or something, and they read it and they get a wrong view of what went on. You know, I think it's the inaccuracy of it all that drives. You don't mind a bad review if you really played lousy.
Yeah, if it was innocently recorded, by journalists. If it was bad, it was bad, and I mean we've been bad. On some American gigs, we've been
But then you hate the review anyway, because you don't need to be told.
Yeah, you don't even want to read it, but somehow or another it sneaks into the bedroom at about 4 in the afternoon. But
that brings a question to my mind, another question that I've been meaning to ask you for years, truthfully. And that's, when you're doing, and when you become as big as you guys are, and you're doing, like, say, a gig, and you know that it wasn't the way it should be, and yet you still get 3, 4, 5 requests for encores, at least whether you do them or not. You know, the crowd standing in the aisles. How do you differentiate between when you know you were really good and you should give, as to opposed to, well, we really weren't up to snuff, and yet these kids are still flipping out?
These guys are really good.
You know, does that kind of throw you off at all?
Well, let's say it's a complete reversal of the press, isn't it? It's the complete opposite way around, which is also equally as antagonising, really. Because, like, then you do go on, and the encores are fantastic then, aren't they?
Yeah, but there are also a lot of reasons why you might reckon that you haven't done too well. I mean, I did a whole set in Santa Monica where I never heard the bass all night, which is quite difficult to play an instrument you can't hear at all. And I was really in a bad mood, and everything I did was like a bear all night. You know, and people came up to me and said, "Hey, that's the best bass sound we've ever heard." You know,
Yes.
I just couldn't hear it on stage, and so
Yeah.
being in the audience in front of the PA, people get a completely different view of things.
Yes.
And
Yeah, you can get thrown on stage with a sound that you hear on stage as opposed to what it's
Right.
like out the front.
this has a lot to do with it.
And your morale can sink during the night if the monitor balance isn't right and all the technical bits and pieces aren't right. But
Also, you start dwelling on the faults,
yeah,
which you consider really glaring, and in fact, are not nearly as bad. But I think it's still a necessary thing to do, you know, to remain as critical as you can.
yeah. Well, it's
at all
good that
times.
we're still that conscientious because it's easy to get away.
You
It's
imagine
easy to take the other approach.
you're that damn good that you can't
Do a little
even
amount of rehearsing as possible and
hear
just go
what
out
you're
and play.
playing,
you
but
know?
But isn't that
You're
isn't that
still
what
in the
differentiates what is to be a really great musical
Well, it just
organization
goes-
as opposed to someone who's just in it for the money? I mean, you
Yeah,
know,
but it
really
just goes
great.
to prove really that we like that when we started after the kind of all the setbacks that have been, when we started to rehearse again, and we knew that we had to try and take things further on when we made the new album. We knew we had to try and it had to try and move a little bit in a way that people would realise
Through
that
the airport.
lots of things change, you know, including the outlook of the band. And that. And likewise, in rehearsals, we knew that when we went on stage, we couldn't get away with giving one iota less than we've ever given before. And we had to try and move it across, you know. It's like kind of chess, really, because you're playing it with yourself. You know, you've got to prove to yourself, never mind the audience. You know, if you walk off after about 4 or 5 gigs, and you look at each other and go, like, had this last night not been quite as great as it was for ourselves, we wouldn't be talking to you now. We'd have run away last night and gone home to begin with, but then we'd have been questioning the whole kind of seriousness of the band, I think.
Led Zeppelin, the band that cares.
Yeah.
Well, I think you do, but I think you have to. You know, I really, like I said before, you know, from my particular vantage point
Yeah.
as a jock, and what I think, you know, is a great musical organization as opposed to something that's come along and may have a gimmick, and, you know, I'd rather not mention any names, you know, and that they'll be here now, but, you know, 2 years from now we know they won't, and we know an awful lot of bands who've received an awful lot of acclaim, and that has happened to them,
Fads.
and due to no
Fads
internal
versus
problems,
trends.
just basically the audience got tired of them, or, like you said, they
Or
didn't
his
care
flute
enough.
got bunged up.
You know, but I think that's what the great bands have to care, and regardless of what's going down in their life, how much money they've made, whatever they're doing, you know, when they go into the recording studio or when they go on stage, at that point, they've
Yeah.
got to care. You know, they've got to think about giving the best. You know, and obviously you can't do that. If you do 100 gigs, you know, then 100 of them are not going to come out that way. But as long as you're shooting for that, I
Yeah.
think you can maintain that stage.
Well, if you can get your finger on the pulse that makes it all work anyway, which is sometimes quite hard to find, you know.
Well, you've got to please yourself, basically,
Yeah.
before you can pass it on to anybody else at all.
Exactly,
If you're
yeah.
not happy with the band or with the numbers or anyway, I mean, there's no amount of rehearsing, of hype, of light shows, flash spots that'll make it any better. You know, I mean, you've got to.
It'll feel
it's
tired, yeah.
really
it'll feel
enjoyable.
Yeah, it'll
on-
feel
on
wrong.
stage, and
I've always had
it has
an
to be
analogy
all
where I
there.
equated it with like building an ice cream sundae, you know, great American ice cream sundae.
Yeah.
You know, that you can have, you know, you put the ice cream in first and the whipped cream and the nuts and the chocolate and whatever you want to put on it. But if the ice cream itself isn't rich and really good, you've really got nothing there. And that's, you know, and I think
Right.
that's what great bands have to do, and that's what you do.
Well, that's what we've managed to do again. I think we can safely say that.
We'll do again and
Should we
again.
tell them about the solo album, Jonesy?
No,
No, listen, when a band, you know, when a band attains kind of like the lofty status of which the Zeppelin now enjoys, of course, and deservedly so, all right, I would say that just for the individual members of the band, personal survival, well, inaccessibility becomes imperative, really, in a way, you know, because so many people are coming on to you, so you have to have that time for yourselves. However, how does one go about the possibility of becoming, say, maybe ingrown and maybe too protected from reality, because, you know, like any big band or big artist has that particular problem, and also possibly out of touch with the audience because of that.
Well, that can't happen because we're English and nobody thinks we are. In other words, when we stay in England, people don't really, I mean, apart from something like Nebworth, which hasn't happened before for us, people think we're a band who did well in America because we don't play here that often. When a record comes out, it's only an album, it goes into the album charts for a period of time, which doesn't get mass listening on the radio or anything like that, as you know, the radio structure in Britain. So we just take them as guys who are in some kind of band that makes sense somewhere else. So the ingrowing aspect of it doesn't really exist at all, because you can be free as a bird here, you know.
Yeah.
Right, so what sort of reality are we protected from?
No, I don't mean that. I just meant, and please understand it, and
God, every day I
and don't
try
think
to
I'm
keep
like, throwing insults. I think this happens to anyone,
No.
whether you be a, motion picture actor or actress, whatever. When you really make it big, obviously you have this buffer zone around you, even whether you want it there or not, it is there. But it is quite different here. I noticed that. I mean, truthfully, you could leave the concert here, and you have to make haste, because you are who you are. But not like it is in America, where actually they'll overturn the limousine, Let's say I'm speaking from an American standpoint, though. If you were in America, I mean, is it possible for, like, say, you to go into a bar or just walk up to some kid in a store and just really talk to them without them going just gaga? I mean, really find out what's on their mind and what's happening with them.
I think if you...
Well, some of us have more trouble than others.
Yeah, but some of us find the right bars.
There's always a bar that'll just let you drink.
Yeah, I think if you do come across, if you're wandering around in the States and there's not a great crowd of people. In other words, if you are just walking through a department store or something like that, and a couple of guys see you, they'll go loony initially, and as soon as they start to talk to you, they just go, "Oh, hang on a tick, this bloke." We can't make a fuss because this guy's talking to us like he's not sort of sending coded messages, or like he hasn't suddenly stepped onto a cloud to address us. He's asking us what we think about Bob Seger's new album or something like that. And so...
Well, your own attitude has got a lot to do
Yeah,
with it.
and so the rapport develops by the fact that they immediately find out that you're as human as anything. The very fact that you're talking to us, it could be that, like, although you're our friend and you have been for a long time, it could be anybody, really. It's not special, I mean, it's special that we're having a chat about the band and talking about American people who've always been good to us, but I mean, it ain't special that somebody's able to get close enough to us to start talking. I mean, we have to go out looking for company sometimes.
So are you as amazed as the people that you know in your peer group who have made it like that? I mean, because you've always been that way, and that's the way I've always found the boys in the band to be. It's always that really way, accessible to me as far as if I would just wanted to sit and talk to you. But do you find, I know that you know people, we'd rather not mention names, who've taken this all to their heads, and I just wanted to know how one keeps that perspective, as you're going along.
But people go out and look for that. Some people feed off it, like the socialite type of thing, the thing where, like, you're a kind of superligger, if you like. You're there and you're seen at every kind of function, and I mean, there's in like the Andy Warhol period and moving on and
nobody
on.
asks us anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we're not special to anybody, so like we don't end up in society columns and things, and so there's not a full sense of importance put on by that. We are a band who plays some really good music from time to time, and that is our importance. Off stage, there should be no importance at all. There's nothing more special about us than anybody else, and it is true that's the case. And all the friends I got in California started off by stepping 3 steps backwards when they met me, and then 4 steps forward when they realised it was okay. So it's only a case of familiarity, really.
I see.
That's it.
In line with that, artists like say Bruce Springsteen and Aerosmith and the Stones and a host of others have all played clubs in smaller halls in the past 2 years or so. And if it were possible for you, would you like the intimacy of playing, say, in a smaller venue?
Yeah, well, there's nothing like the intimacy, the atmosphere of a small club. But I mean, it's it's back to the old story. If you play a huge place, they say, "God, we can't see you. You're a dot on the stage," and this and that. And then if you play a small club, they say, "How can they be so selfish? There's only 2,000 people can see him at a time. Why don't they play somewhere where we can all go? I mean, you can't win."
Yeah, well, what's been happening, like say in the States, like say since you've been off the scene for a while, is that what they'll do, like, well, take Springsteen for instance. So he'll play the Forum gig, so that everyone who wants to see him can see him, and then kind of all of a sudden, like out of the blue, because they know they have to do it quite right and coordinate it quite right. But they'll play a small club like say the Roxy in Los Angeles, and they'll do that, like for a night just to get that. They'll they'll do a very special number with the tickets so that the real people, can see them and not just the record company people or people in the business.
Oh, that's a relief.
And they just do it and bang, and they go in and there'll be that one night. Happen all of a sudden.
Well, the Rocks is a great place, but I mean, really, you'd need somewhere like Marshall Brevitt's. Remember, he used to have that. I don't know whether you were in LA at the time.
The Experience.
The Experience.
Yes, I remember that.
You need somewhere that's a wee bit tacky, and then we could at the sound check for Nebworth, we were doing "You Shook Me" with Bonzo's son Jason playing drums. It was great to be able to play that again, and it would be nice to do smaller places and go back to that rather than play the stuff from In Through the Outdoor or from the other albums, but get into the stuff that. When last night we did that boogie thing, and it was great. I could have done at least 2 or 3 hours of that sort of stuff quite easily. The lyrics could have fallen out, and you could do a small club like that where everybody's drinking and glasses are tinkling, and there's not that great kind of self-importance.
Or you can make it like a Led Zeppelin jam instead of like a Led Zeppelin show sort of thing where you're going to hear all your favorite raves. Folks.
Well,
basically it's a jam. We're going to get together. We're going to jam. You want to see it? Fine. It's going to happen. Bing. Tonight at this place, and this is how you go about getting tickets. And that's it.
Yeah, it would be terrible if it misfired though, and you got lots and lots of people there, and it got kind of pandemonium.
That's true.
You see, the thing is, if people would cool it a wee bit, or if it is cooled out a wee bit, you could do that sort of thing and have so much pleasure out of it. That's what I long to do.
Now, how did it work? Like when you were rehearsing for these gigs here in England, I understand you played in Copenhagen, right? In a small venue, 2,000 people or so.
Yeah,
is that right?
It was a theatre though, so it was very orderly.
I see.
The thing is, in Copenhagen, it's like the kind of home of
Danish orderly as well.
Yeah, the home of Bohemia, if you like, and really, there's some great. Remember them clubs we used to go to? Not the them clubs, but the other kind.
Oh,
the jazz clubs and things. There was some great blues. You could go there and it was nice and kind of dusky and a little bit kind of beatnik kind of vibe, and you could play the blues all night, and you'd probably get so much pleasure out of that, and Jonesy could be jazzing away at the same time, and it'd be lovely to do it like that, and leave Kashmir alone for a little while, and that's what I said to when we had lots of talks about what we were going to do. I said, "Oh, come on, let's just go somewhere, like all big bands have to, under a different name, and just play it."
That's interesting. I gotta pause for a sec, y'all. So, we're at the 30-minute mark. So, this is a really cool interview so far. Really cool interview. And I really dig JJ Jackson and his style of interviewing. It's personable. He is not one of these buckaroos trying to get his 15 minutes of fame and pushing any kind of issues that could challenge or embarrass the lads. He's just being very, very personable and professional, and I really, really dig this guy, man. I gotta take a closer look at who JJ Jackson was. Send me whatever you got on JJ Jackson. I'm intrigued by not just the band, but also the people around them. The people that help to showcase them in a good light. The great people behind them that made them great. Yes, the Peter Grants and the great engineers and all of these different types of people, but also someone like JJ Jackson who understands their dilemma and their frustrations and dealing with Rolling Stone, for example, and not being cast in the right light. He's relatable, he can understand it, and he can also understand the fans on the different levels of the fans. Yeah, this guy, man, has a really, really deep understanding of what makes a rock star, and he can go into the fiber of their being, can't he? And he can ask those questions, and look, he can just ask the question, shut up for a while, and they're both talking and they're both giving 2-minute answers, stuff like that. That's a good interviewer. Right on. So Gotta top up my rum, gotta hit the John, and then we'll be back with a little bit more of this excellent interview. I'll see you in a sec. Okay, y'all, back again. Rum is topped up, bladder is relieved. Excited to get back to this interview. Let's get it.
I know, John Paul, in your home, that one can find practically about every string instrument that's ever been made in the world. And Zeppelin fans know that you play keyboards, of course, and bass, and I don't know if they're quite knowledgeable when it comes to how diversified you really are and your taste in music. Have you ever considered like doing, like, say, a solo album to show, like, kind of, you know, your R&B leanings and your jazz leanings and all those different things?
Well, I don't know, Zeppelin keep you busy enough. You could have done more. But, no, I seem to manage to get most things on, you know. I mean, if anybody needs another instrument, oh, James will play it, thank you, you know, and I have to do some more running about on stage. I think I must have only played bass on like 4 or 5 numbers this last one.
Yeah.
Really? I understand this.
But I like it, you know, keyboards, I get to sit down.
And at his age, he needs to.
Yeah, it's old dinosaurs, you know, I mean, you got to take it easy sometimes.
No,
I enjoy just running about and doing silly things.
But you've never given any consideration to a solo album?
Yeah, well, sort of every other day. But,
Yeah. Well, not exactly a solo album.
No, it's
No, when I say that solo album, I mean, you know, just featuring John Paul and basically doing things that maybe the Zeppelin wouldn't want to, you know.
Well,
you see, the trouble is, if I want to do a solo album, you know,
I want to
short of playing all the instruments myself, which is very boring, you know, because you get nothing on. I mean, I'll need a drummer, right? Now, there's only one drummer I can play with.
I think we need one, at least it needs to be 2 people to do a solo album. Because you've got to, as silly as it sounds, because you've got to bounce off somebody else.
That's the new Bonham-Jones duo.
Yeah, but what I meant by that, Robert, is like, in other words, like, we've seen those albums come out where they'll go, and like I said, the guys...
They're very sterile, though, a lot of them.
Yeah, but...
Because if you've worked as a band for a long time, and you think you've got a deal to put down by yourself, it gets a bit too insulated then, doesn't it?
You think so?
Yeah.
Well, like, say, like Steely Dan, where they go now, and obviously not doing solo albums, but I mean, each particular track on their album, you know, they might use Purdy on drums, Bernard Purdy, you know, on this particular track, because maybe that track has more of an R&B or a soul-flavored thing to it. And then they'll come over and they'll use someone else for another track that has, you know, nothing to do with, you know, rhythm and blues. And then they'll use because there's only 2 main members of that particular band, right? And every track they're using different musicians, different guitarists, because they're looking for a different sound. And I mean, I'm not a musician, but if I were and I were going to do a solo album, that's what I meant by a solo album. It's not actually just one person
but
playing
when you've had Bonzo booting you along for like 10 years,
trying to get out of the closet,
you definitely miss it with anybody else. You know?
Yeah, he's a great drummer. He's incredible.
Short of Jason, actually.
His son's pretty good.
His son is incredible.
Is he really?
Just like
I met him yesterday.
Amazing.
Is he really?
He played Trampled Underfoot as well at that.
I know, yeah, and I was playing serious. I was like really getting into it. I suddenly was, wait a minute. I looked over, you know, and it was only sort of half the size, but the same sound. Like,
I understand your contribution to this album is more than ever on any past Led Zeppelin albums, and I just wanted to know how and why that. You know,
well, I got to the studio early. It's quite simple, really.
Very true as well. Me and Jonesy were always there before the others.
We were up, and so we put them down, didn't we? I mean, you know. But I mean, it's always been the way of the band, sort of whoever gets it. It's first come, first served, really, as far as the numbers are concerned.
Yeah, if Jimmy gets to the rehearsal place first,
it's true,
the next album will go a totally different way. And that's about it, really.
Do you remember the beautifully photographed film Barry Lyndon, Stanley Kubrick's film?
No, never saw it.
You never did?
No.
Oh, you really should. Well, anyway, because when I first saw it, I thought, well, maybe if Robert Plant, you know, had the lead in that film, it may have been more successful than it was, you know. And like Daltrey, you know, Daisy, like Roger Daltrey's been obviously getting a little bit more into films. He's doing a film now. I think it's called McVicar. He bought the rights for. Anyway, the question is, you think you might consider doing any films?
It's just like the same aspect as television. So, you know, it's like one kind of pedestal or whatever you like that I like to avoid. I like theatre maybe, but I got the wrong kind of accent, you know, for straight theatre or anything like that, because I've got a brogue. It's like kind of north of England thingy bob. So that means it cuts me out of the theatre generally, as far as the accepted theatre goes or anything like that. And the repetition of it I wouldn't enjoy. Although theatre would be the closest I could get to getting near a big screen. I mean, it was horrendous doing The Song Remains the Same.
But you came across so well.
It was only because of that blonde chick. Oops, sorry.
No,
I know, but it's a bit too narcissistic, really, you know.
Oh, but maybe that's because you're looking at it the wrong way. Because I wasn't even thinking of that side, you know. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, but you've got to have it right. And if you're going to have it right, you've got to like roll it again, and you know, get used to working in front of cameras. And I prefer to save my energy to working in front of people there and then, you know. I don't think really that I'd have a great deal to offer anyway, because I mean,
is he referring to the lady that?
Well, I don't know. It'd have to slip in some way. I mean, I wouldn't mind sort of doing documentaries.
The maiden that he was rescuing.
You know, you see these guys swimming under the sea looking for ancient ruins and things like that. Well, something not particularly ancient ruins, because I'm playing with three, but like something like following a love of mine, like the sort of historical thing or something like that. I'd like to be able to perhaps one day take a serious look at things like that.
Oh, I didn't know.
But none of your starring roles. I mean, Daisy Daughtry called me up once after we had that accident in Greece, and he said, "Oh, you don't want to worry about singing." He said, "Well, I know you're in a wheelchair and all that." He said, "Take some elocution lessons," which was a big word anyway, and start making movies. He said, "You can do it. You're a front man in a band." He said, "It's much more fun." And I said, "No, couldn't even imagine it."
So the reason I thought about it was, you know, and you know, we all know obviously that a lot of the American girls look at you and say, "Oh God, the sex symbol of the band" and all that. But I wasn't thinking in that aspect. I was thinking in knowing you, and in knowing you as many years as I have, all the different sides that even seriously sometimes on stage is not seen. You know, that you can be very, very tender. You can also be very strong. You have a range as a person and as a personality.
Yeah, but that ricochets from it's cause and effect. I mean, it comes from the fact that the music is very dramatic in places, and the tender stuff is also very dramatic. You know, and it's only because of the spectrum of the music that I can be as I am. You know, I mean, I've got up with a lot of other bands. Small bands, and had the time of my life doing Hallelujah, I Love Her So and stuff like that, and singing really well. But I was glued to the spot on the stage. I couldn't move. I didn't even think about moving, you know. But when I play with these gentlemen, then there's an immediate kind of fire off. You know, however tired or however jaded I feel. As soon as it starts, like at the end of a tour or something, I think, oh, I just want to go home quick. To the hills, you know, or something like that. And then as soon as it starts, bang! But if you stuck me in front of a camera, the dynamism, I couldn't imagine it recreating unless I had a rapport with another actor or another character, you know.
I see.
Where we could really get something firing. Right. And I can't imagine transposing from a musical into a kind of just a straight dramatic tangent. I don't think it would work.
But you said you were interested in history. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, I've got a great love of, I don't know, dark age history, if you like, and it would be nice perhaps to pursue that on a documentary level one day.
Imagine
perhaps start
Robert
getting
Plant
a bit
as a
serious,
character in
whiz
Game
around
of
the world
Thrones.
to all the wondrous old spots, but that's hardly along the lines you were on about, you know.
Yeah, but that's a different thing.
I don't particularly want to draw an audience in to see my capabilities as a bad actor.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's got to be customized to you.
Listen, I'm sure that you do not disdain the idea of a hit single, all right? Because you're the only major band that comes to my mind anyway who seemingly need not have a hit single in order for the album to almost immediately go platinum. But don't you find this to be a rather unique phenomenon today? Because most bands and most individual artists have to have a single to kind of
but that's the mechanics of the business, and it's one thing that, although Peter guides us in his sort of unique way very, very well, that's one thing that's unspoken really, that like, I mean, if you have to go to such a degree, there are certain channels that you take to try and promote an album, which are natural anyway, but I mean, to take a cut off it so that people listen to the cut and then go and buy the album is not particularly, at this time in in our lives, the way that we want to do things, so that you put a single out to sell an album. That's kind of the wrong way. The album will sell if it's good, and it'll sell to a degree if it's not good, you know. But there's no point in taking the best track or something like that and sticking it out and fishing, you know.
Right.
Or making an album last and last and last by putting out cuts, you know. I don't really think. It's another thing. There are one or two little principles that we've got. Mind you, on the new album, there are a couple of things that would stand nicely as singles, as little showpieces. And there's a few things in the can that haven't come out that are also rather novel.
You know what we do too? There's two things on the same subject. I haven't heard the album, like I said, and I'm sure by the time this interview is heard, you know, the album will have been heard by me and by everyone else. And I wish I could do it then, but at any rate,
you're going to be in for a wee bit of a surprise.
But last night in the stage show, there were two tracks from the new album that you played, and in the evening struck me, as I said, you know, if the Zeppelin, obviously knowing you for 10 years, I know that's not the way you approach things, but I said, you know, if they were to do that, I said, this is obviously got all the hooks, everything that you need for a hit single. You know, it's really there.
Yeah, but it's too long.
No.
I mean, I thought a single had to be 3 minutes at the most.
No, not anymore. That's
really?
not true.
Oh, hang on, haven't I got something to do with the record company anyway? And I'll leave the singles to Dave Edmunds because he's really good at them, you know. And
times were changing.
But as an album goes, there are several tracks that are well, they're quite diverse in their very foundation, really. You see, when I had no intention of playing again at all, or even being a part of anything again particularly. And so when the time came that I was faced with either saying goodbye to my fellows and doing something totally new, not particularly musically or whatever, and we got together, I said, yeah, well, if I'm going to do anything at all, it obviously has to be it's just got to keep changing. It always has changed to a degree, but I just wanted it to be a little more mellow, or to explore facets that normally we would have thrown out as being a wee bit too soft, aspects of us that weren't probably what people quite expected. And I think really that is going to be in the next few years our ability to stay around, you know? The fact that we're now prepared to explore even farther. And this album really is just the kind of foot in the door for the next few years
Confirmed.
to come.
But isn't that one of the things that kind of has been a hallmark of Led Zeppelin?
Sure,
but I think this is
their
like
signature sound would be
this
like going
point,
into
this
the
album
80s.
is even more demonstrative of that kind of principle.
From In Through the Out.
Where you could get a lot of people who considered that Zeppelin were only good for like the very heavy aspects of things, or heavy, blatantly heavy. I mean, you can be you can be dramatic without being like thunderous, you know, and looming. And so I think this album really is like the kind of look, well, if I'm a California, don't like it, but I think really it's just shown that like, after dismissing all ideas of creativity on a musical level for a while, that it came back the way it did, you know. And it's good, it's interesting. It's probably the sign of a lot more better things to come, you know. Because I think we had a stagnant period which we played through to a degree after the accident and all that. And I think now it's well, I think we were so grateful when we got in the studio together and found that we could still create, and it was still interesting, and it wasn't a bluff, you know. That's probably like the kind of hallmark of times ahead. If it ain't, I'm off, you know.
Yeah, I think it is from what I heard last night.
Of times
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm quite sure of that.
He already had it in his
Would
mind
you like to
what they
go
were
through
going to
this album
sound
track
like
by track?
going into
Well,
the 80s.
first track on the one side is a thing called Carouselambra, which is a peculiar title, I suppose, really. It got slammed in the British press for being, once again, that tired old mystical feel, but what it is in fact an extended piece with John Paul doing a lot of the kind of work on it, well, not a lot of the kind of work, but like dictating the movement of the thing, with a kind of I can't say kind of too often, with a lyrical content that leans back towards what you might have thought of Battle of Evermore and things like that. But in fact, it has got nothing to do with that at all. It's just a shroud, that is, for something that I was relating to that's very present. In other words, it's like a kind of, it's another one of those nice little hidden things where one day the person who it's all about will go, oh my God, is it really like that, you know? But it's a long piece and it's an interesting piece.
You know, I got to
in a
go
way,
back
and that's
to
one
that
of the good things, really. It's
and get the
it's
lyrics
not like
up.
Achilles' Last Stand, which I really love.
He's
but
taking jabs at Page, right?
It contains some of the majesty that was in that song, that cut, you know. But because it's, I mean, Achilles' Last Stand was basically about travels and dreams and wishes and positivity, whereas this is like a retrospect of a period of time and a few characters. So Carousel Amber is one of the more lengthy bits.
I should do a back-to-back with
All My
Achilles'
Love
Last Stand and then
is
Carousel
another
Amber. Compare.
removal again. It was one of the times when Jonesy and I got there first to the rehearsal room, and I said, now why don't we find let's do some real simple stuff now. You know, let's try and do some things with a really nice hook in that is really pretty, you know, something that is short, sweet, pretty and to the point. And I think that All My Love really is well, it's a song that in the end I'd like to be remembered for, really, as much as Stairway.
Really?
Yeah. I find after a while that, like, people, I don't know, Stairway, if you sing it a lot, and if you've gone through one or two trials and thingy-bobs, in the end you think, how can I sing this and feel the way I felt, you know? And All My Love is an extension of it, if you like. Which you will know that. It's a shame you haven't heard it, actually. I should be playing it to you now. I'm Gonna Crawl. It's got nothing to do with carpet burns or anything like that. In the 60s, there was a great kind of movement with Atlantic Records and a lot of little independent record companies, and a lot of guys like Otis Redding, O.V. Wright, you know, Wilson Pickett and things, to do things like Pain in My Heart, you know.
I'm Sick, Y'all.
Yeah, but there was one track, the first thing that Wilson Pickett ever did, It's Too Late.
Yes.
You know, and all those great slow R&B, but just going into soul.
Yeah,
period.
like I'm in Love that Pickett did, remember that? I'm in love.
Yeah, all those
So
kind of
much
things.
in
So I thought I wanted to just do something a little bit like that, but a little bit kind of tongue-in-cheek too. God forbid that it should be taken seriously. And so, like, I mean, the lyrics are really mundane. It's really like, she's the apple of my eye vibe, you know. But it's a great atmosphere on it. Really good atmosphere. And the only thing that's missing is the horn section, because Jonesy couldn't learn how to play horns in time, you know. But it's great. I love that. It's really good and it's very moody. Well, I shouldn't say it's really good, really, should I?
Still had some
Oh, I think you should.
signature
Yeah,
sound. and
You should be
some,
proud of what you're putting out. Why not?
Yeah, I know, but I should leave that to other people to decide. And there goes Jonesy. He got away.
The old chopper.
Yes, that's about the only one he's got. And on the other, on side one, going backwards, side one in the evening, the thing that you heard last night, is a great, real stomper, but like a pull back. And a very good, well, crikey, I go, blow me own trumpet.
Oh, no.
Should have blown it on the end of I'm Gonna Crawl, it would have been much better. Again, he's using a lot of keyboards and synthesized strings and things like that, but it really is a kind of a growler, something I like a lot. Southbound Suarez is a reminiscent of, I suppose, it's about 5 o'clock in the morning in New Orleans. I'm wishing you got the strength you had at 9 a.m.
Yes.
It's one of them. But it's a real good one. That has a nice belting thing, and that's probably the more typical
I like that one.
thing that people could immediately go, "Ah, that's a bit like Custard Pie or something like that."
Or the Wanton Song.
Wanton Song, yeah, it's got a kind of drive like that. Fool in the Rain.
That's my jam.
Well, I don't know. Fool in the Rain is most unusual for us, really, because Well, I don't think we would have played it had the situations been different, but with the World Cup in Argentina in '78 and a lot of this kind of South American thing going around, and it being, every time you watched any soccer on television, it was always a South American kind of rhythm thing going along. It's not an attempt to be Carlos Santana or anything like that. It's kind of a little bit diversified from the straightforward, you know. And Hot Dog owes everything to
the state of
Audrey.
Texas. To the state of Texas?
Yeah, to the state of Texas and to the state of some of the people in Texas. It's no kind of big thing that a lot of English bands have taken so much from America and then taken it back again. With from as diverse areas as Muddy Waters going in through to Scotty Moore and all those people, James Burton, who played with Elvis and Rick Nelson and all that, and the whole country rockabilly thing, which I believe now is starting to be remembered in the States again.
Yeah, it's doing well. Robert Gordon and people like that are bringing it back to us.
But you see the thing, yeah, exactly, they're bringing it back to you. But I mean, Conway Twitty and Billy Lee Riley. Now, who's one of the... Charlie Rich. Yeah, when he was on Sun, he did Lonely Weekends and all those sort of things. Philadelphia Baby. Great tracks. I mean, superb tracks. And people are going out and listening to a lot of imitators now, you know. And these guys were so hot. I mean, if Sam Phillips just reshoot Philadelphia Baby, it would sound like everything the new wave ever wanted to try and do. You know, great choruses and everything like that. So Hot Dog is really a kind of just touching base.
Isn't that something that the English bands have always been very good at doing? I mean, that's when we started with rock and roll. It was the English bands that taught, truthfully, and to be straightforward about it, that taught white America about black blues. You know, the English bands are the ones that took in the J.B. Lenoirs and all that, Muddy Waters and all those people, and revamped it and turned it back to us.
Well, I can't believe that like, you had people from like Eddie Cochran, right, who Liberty Records was based in California. And I mean, he made some of the most classic cuts ever, and it's taken people like the Sex Pistols to bring them to America, you know. I mean, if anybody who's listening ever gets an opportunity, I mean, I you know, and we've been around a long time, and our tastes might be quite wide, but to get an Eddie Cochran album with something like Nervous Breakdown or 20 Flight Rock or something like that, I mean, it puts everything in the shade, you know. This guy was on your doorstep. Gene Vincent, all these people who are vaguely known and not taken half as seriously as somebody like the Searchers or something like that, which is like disgusting, really.
Yeah. What can you do?
And I don't know how it is. I mean, in France it's even bigger, really. In France you can get everything you can't get in England.
But do you think maybe the basis of this, you know, like I said, you know, like you're saying that's true now, and it's quite true with rockabilly, America starting to wake up to that. And like
Good, I've got another 10 years of my career left.
And like we said in the late
Phil Carson on slap bass.
And like we said in the late 60s, you know, the same thing. It was blues, you know, and it was blues over here. And but
you got Paul Butterfield though.
Yeah, but I'm saying as far as really big, but there were so many different people that really weren't putting it out. And it took bands like the Zeppelin and bands like Beck and the Stones and all those bands, and we can go on, you know, to reissue that to the American public and to wake up to things that were right on their doorstep, whether it's blues and now it's rockabilly. But I think maybe one of the reasons is not just, you know, that we're ignorant in any particular way. It might be radio, for instance, because that leads to this last question I have on that.
But also, you're such a vast, as Jonesy and I were saying when you were turning the tape over, it's such a vast country. You know, I mean, you begin to forget when you live on a little island like this.
Yeah, but also with radio.
Things were like, certain areas of America had a musical rising, if you like, something going on that never affected the rest of the country.
That's right, that's true.
Like in Tennessee, the prime combination, I mean, Tennessee is responsible, and Sam Phillips and Memphis itself, and this is not baloney, is responsible for you being here, for us being here and everything, because there were guys down there who took the black music and the best of the kind of English folk music, which had become country and western, if you like, or whatever the term is, just down-home chorale music and taken the
all that
juke
stuff,
joints
that's
and the sharecroppers music
Motown and Muscle
and
Shoals.
combined the two so that you got a rent party kind of vibe with a white man singing it, and gave us the birth of something that now makes millions
The
of people
creative
flock to stadiums every week around the world. I mean, that was the beginning of it all. It's like the Industrial Revolution started up by where I live, and the first iron bridge was put across a river. Like, that was no big deal then, and now a great deal of people go back. But the importance is parallel. That like the Tennessee, like, and it was all going on. Now it didn't go right across the board. You see, in America, in California, it probably only scraped the surface. Elvis came out of it, and Jerry Lee, you know. But there were so many great people who have gone by the wayside, and so many imitators, and we were just poor imitators. I mean, from 1958 to about 19, and I'm a bit of a rock historian here, through to about 1963, 64, England had the good studios, but they had session musicians, not like Jonesy and Page who broke away, but like old fuddy-duddies who covered every single American song that ever came across the water, you know.
The Funk Brothers.
So poorly, so badly, so diabolically, that it made us keep, all the young guys, the hip guys, were going, hang on, but if we hear the originals of these things, we can really catch it. And that's where the Beatles took things like Money, Please Mr. Postman, and all, well, not, that was a bit later on, but all them early things, and Right String Baby but the Wrong Yo-Yo, all the Carl Perkins stuff, and went right back there and borrowed it from the guys. So, but in the meantime, in England, records were being made that were so poor that we had to go and find the proper stuff.
Right.
Thank you.
Wow.
I just want to thank you for giving me this time, man, because I know you've been really busy.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I'm a little more relaxed than I was this time last week. I'm ready to go again now.
Well, I'm glad. And last but not least, let me just say again, we really look forward to seeing you back in the States again. That's no BS.
Right on. Great interview. Oh,
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to add also my thanks to Peter Grant, who gave us the freedom to do what we did. And also, thank you, my friends, for finally remembering my phone number.
right on. Take the chance, take the opportunity when it's there. You'll never get it again. There you go. Wow, man. This was an excellent three-parter, if you will, from Jonesy's early days as a session man, which we don't explore near enough, to that really excellent interview with him and Plant. And I guess that interview came by way of the fact that they were promoting In Through the Outdoor, which the two of them collectively had such a really big hand in contributing to. So having the two of them paired up in an interview is really cool. Listening to them, listening to the way they talk, how they see things, their creative process, their interpersonal dynamics of the band. And I also got out of that what Plant's vision was for Led Zeppelin going forward. I've always thought that way. A lot of people have thought that way. That, yeah, man, you know, he really has an idea of what they're going to sound like going into the 80s, because he knew that that was a point break. That was a transitional thing. Things were in the air, things were changing, and yeah, you know, literally in my mind confirmed what they would have sounded like going into the 80s. Kind of like the tracks on the album of In Through the Outdoor, that sound maybe a little bit more synth-led, piano-led, or whatever the case is, but they still had the signature Led Zeppelin sound, the charm, some of the thunder and all of that sort of thing, but mixing it up a little bit, like he said, you know, having a track like Carousel Alhambra and changing things up to Fool in the Rain, and then going into, so that album, those tracks in that album represent a lot of great diversity from them. Now they've showed that throughout their entire stint, you know, especially starting with Led Zeppelin 3 onward. But yeah, man, I really believe that they would have been very strong, very present, maybe not super supreme on top, because there was the changing of the tides in the 80s, all kinds of new bands, new sounds coming up. You had the punk movement on. So, but they would have still been stellar. They would have still been solid. And they would have been attracting a younger generation who would appreciate that sound that they had in the 80s, but also appreciating what they offered in the 70s. So they would have still been on top. They would have still been solid. So, man, and then, Jonesy at the end there. I heard about this, and I remember actually seeing this before. I have seen this before, and yeah, man. Very, very interesting in the context of the aftermath of Page and Plant collaborating without him, going on the road, promoting, calling an album no quarter when he had so much contributions going in. The entity of Led Zeppelin is more than just one individual. Yes, Page owns the machine and he can do whatever he wants with it, but it goes beyond that now, because it is in here for all of us. It isn't just about Page and Plant wanting to do what they want to do, because you're not just representing Jonesy, you're also representing us, the fans. And Jonesy is a part of that great collective, because we followed these guys, we grew up with these guys, we fell in love with these guys, and at the end, it was not the best decision to go along using Led Zeppelin songs without Jonesy, without his acknowledgement, without his approval, without all of that sort of thing. Not your finest hour. Although I know that some people can really get combative. Well, you got to understand, at the time this was going on, this. All white noise. Don't care. The bottom line is this: Page and Plant should have told him what they intended to do, and they should have sought his blessing and his acknowledgement. And on top of that, they should have also considered the fans. Yes, of course, there are some fans who would say, yeah, to get a dose of Page and Plant, to get a little bit of Led Zeppelin is better than no Led Zeppelin. Totally understand that point of view as well. But in the end, for me personally, being a fan who loves Led Zeppelin, who loves the whole iconicness of what Led Zeppelin is, it's bigger than just Page and Plant now. It's about the fans and what's in here. And Jonesy is a part of all of that. So, not your finest hour, lads. Love you very much. And I'll take the good, the bad, the ugly. But not your finest hour. And I will always hold true to that conviction. You should have told Jones to not include him, not even alert him, let him know you did him dirty. That's all I got to say about that. So, well, that's all I've got to say, but that's not what the fans have to say. Let's go to that link. Let's read a little bit of what they have to say here. John Paul Jones was the best musician in the band. And lots of thumbs up on that comment. I saw Page and Plant's 1990s in Atlanta, and I thought it was lacking. People who have worked with him, I guess that's what he's trying to say, will tell you he is one of the most talented musicians in the business. That's John Paul Jones. He's also one of the nicest guys in the business. And lots of thumbs up. When the quiet kid roasts the cool kid. Absolutely. And you may say to yourself, well, geez, I think that it was a showing of poor taste on a part of John Paul Jones. Perhaps, perhaps he shouldn't have done that. Perhaps we would have done something differently if we were in his shoes at the time on stage. But I guess too, at the time, it's about the individual, going into the mind of the person and I guess, assuming a certain role and an identity and a stigma and a stamp. Maybe that's not you, not what you wanted to be, but that's the role you had to play for the collective good. And being denied a certain thing and being stamped and labeled as a certain thing, and you have this one golden 20-second opportunity to really let people know how you feel. Some would say he shouldn't have. Some would say, hey, he's justified, whatever the case may be. There's no right or wrong there. But, you know, in the end, I understand. I get it. I get where he was coming from. I feel it. I understand it. Page and Plant needed John Paul Jones more than he needs them. Wow. That's bold and strong. But I think that what they're saying here is it's not complete. Even with Page and Plant doing Led Zeppelin stuff and all that, there is something very, very elemental missing. And you've heard me say it a million times doing these, 250 Led Zeppelin reactions that I've done. You take one person out of that collective of the four, and it's not the same. It's not complete. If you were to replace the departed John Bonham with another drummer, you know it wouldn't be the same thing. The sound wouldn't be the same thing. I remember saying this when I learned about the first incarnation of Led Zeppelin could have included Moon and Entwistle. As great as they are, as great as they were, in that collective, the sound would not be the same, and not for the better. It would not have that soul-grabbing, soul-haunting element that Led Zeppelin will be remembered for. You know what I'm saying? So it takes the four. That's what this person is saying. They had it coming. They forgot the tremendous rhythm section that made so many songs, not to mention the mandolin and keyboard. John Paul Jones is a giant. Thoroughly deserved this. They have been absolute pricks to John Paul Jones over the years. Hell, he almost wasn't invited to play with them at the O2 for the Celebration Day gig, and I still think he's far more talented a musician than Plant and Page, and as much as I like them. Okay, as much as I like them. Okay, it's a little bit broken up there. Damn, I was gonna read one more, but this is long. This person's got a lot to say. Let's read one more and find a short one. Oh, Jonesy, this was savage, but also deserved. Lemon Song is not the same without your funky bass lines. Right on. Oh, let me read this one more. I remember Page and Plant doing No Quarter live without John Paul Jones, and it would have been much better with him. Enough said. All right, enough said there. I don't want to end this reaction attacking Page and Plant, because let's face it, we all make the wrong choices and the wrong decisions, questionable choices, questionable decisions, and we thankfully don't have a spotlight on our ass all the time. So with these guys, I think that they're great, they're masterful in every way, and I like I've said many times, I view Led Zeppelin as a science, and I will take the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm not so blinded and irrational to the point where I will blow sunshine up their asses when they don't deserve it. I will kick those asses when they deserve it, and this is me kicking those asses. You guys, you did Jonesy dirty, but you know what? It's, what's that saying? I can't remember the damn saying now. It's about forgiveness, forgiving. To err is human, to forgive is divine. So you got to take that high road where it comes to it. You've got to say, yes, this is where these guys were. They didn't have the full picture in mind, and they could have done things differently, but they didn't. But in the end, you got to let some shit slide and move on. Appreciate them for the greatness that they were, the contributions they made, and the collective of what Led Zeppelin is, in the end, is what's the most important. Sorry to see that perhaps maybe their relations aren't as strong and as tight. I don't know what their relationship is now. I mean, in their nice seasoned ages of being in the middle 70s. Jonesy's 76, Robert is 74, or soon to be 74. So, now that they're seasoned, they're older, maybe perhaps the serenity factor settles in, and at some point in time they're having tea, and Robert said, yeah, man, you know what, we did you dirty, man. This was me being young, dumb, stupid, ignorant, whatever the case is. Maybe they're going to have that conversation one day, if at all. But at the end, I really dig these guys. I appreciate their contributions. John Paul Jones, the glue of Led Zeppelin, the silent assassin, a very, very essential part to this, and to the point where this will forever plague Page and Plant. In my opinion, it taints them even more than them not giving due credit back in the day, right? I can forgive that more than I can forgive what they did to Jonesy, even though I do forgive it. You know what I'm saying? So that's basically where I'm at. Overall, man, this was excellent. Really, really cool links. I'm really enjoying getting into know the fabric of what John Paul Jones contributed, who the man was, and all of that. And I'm just getting started, right? So expect another Jonesy reaction review or something like that in the next couple of days. Usually I'm going to try and do every other day and go from there, man. Let's see if I got any notes here. Yeah, I'm just going to do my regular reactions, some interesting things coming up. And Amy, I'm going to get back to the rest of these links that you sent me, and I'm going to try and structure and organize them, like I said, where we're focusing on his early years and his Zeppelin years in the front end of the month, and on the back end of the month, the post-Zeppelin years. So getting a really, really good overall overview of who the man is and his great works. Anyways, y'all, thanks for joining me. I'm sure that only the real Led Zeppelin fans are still with me. Thanks very much for being here and supporting my efforts to get to know Led Zeppelin, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hashtag me, I am the real shit. Let me know who you are. For some reason, it just tickles me a little bit when I see that shit. Hashtag me if you're still here. I am the real shit. All right, man. So, that being said, I'm going to bounce. Have yourselves a good day, y'all. Look for my announcement. What's today? Today is Wednesday. So yeah, by Friday you'll see it. I have an announcement to make on this platform. So look for that. It'll be Friday. I'll make it Friday, okay? I got something interesting to say. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. Nothing bad, nothing negative. So anyways, peace out. Take care. I'll see you then.